Okay. Do you wanna carry on, Agnes? So you were in the middle of sharing something. So
Yes, yes. I was sharing on the section 7 that you just released, and I'm looking at how you order your day and how I could possibly learn from that. Would that be right if I kind of like took this as a framework and used it?
so long as you make it your own,
Yeah,
and it's your own connection and relationship, then yeah, it's okay to have something that's a starting point,
yes.
and then you look to develop that pathway and grow. So yeah, there's no problem with that. I think um, a lot of what we do when we first begin is that we use doorways to engage our relationship, um, and going through doorways with others is okay at the beginning of any journey. Helping sort of someone else gives us some level of open doorway to walk through, and then as we walk through it, then we begin to develop it for ourselves.
Hmm.
Um, and I think if you open your first love gate and engage the presence of God, and you set that relationship agenda of intimacy, and then everything can flow out of that. And that's the key. If we're going to bring order into our day, and we want it flowing out of relationship. Um,
Yeah, because I noticed that I do the love gate. I do that every day, and I've done it for the past several months. What I didn't realize is that on top of that, you could do so much more. And that's what I'm learning today. So I'm thinking, oh, I could actually expand that and do, a bit more or a lot more.
oh yeah, because
Yeah,
the relationship just leads into the responsibility,
yeah,
and that's when we become more mature as sons of God, and where our maturity then leads us into legislating and beginning to govern and bring the rule of God. It just must flow out of relationship, and I think that's the key factor in everything. If it comes out of relationship, then it's going to be filled with love,
yeah,
and motivated by love, and motivated by the love of God. Um, so yeah, it's no problem in using a basic format. Um, it will become your own pathway, and you'll be able to develop that in your own life. I mean, once I've engaged God in first love, which I do every day. I'm literally inviting Father, Son, and Spirit to, in a sense, establish the government of the kingdom in my life, relationally and in love. And as a result of that, they form the bench of three in me, if you like. I, as angel of my own house, make a connection with Father, Son, and Spirit to form a doorway or a gateway for the flow of the life of God to flow through me. So then I'm joined to the Lord in one spirit with Him, and I'm looking then to see my spirit as flowing from God's Spirit, um, come around my soul, my body, and then expand outwards. So that it begins to expand around me. So I'm creating the atmosphere of love and the kingdom around me, and the government of God, and wholeness around me, and then I can expand that around that which I carry in my heart. And that's the key. If I don't carry something in my heart, then I have no governmental right to rule. And even if it might be a sphere of influence that God has given me, I must carry it within my heart. The desires of my heart must be turned towards it, and then I then can grow and expand my spirit and the government of God around it. So I do that around my family, around my home, and everything to do with my personal life. I extend my spirit around that, and then I can speak into it administer into it, I can legislate into it, I expand it around our church, because I obviously have a responsibility here, being part of the bench of three of the church, the ecclesia here. I expand it around that, and therefore I have that because I carry it in my heart. Our area and the region, I carry it in my heart so that I can sort of encompass that around, and then begin to minister into it. So, and all that's done through a flow, what's coming through my first love gate, through my spirit, soul, body, outwards, the river of life flowing, rivers of living water, whichever sort of description you want to use. That's really what I'm looking to do on a daily basis. Now, when I then begin to engage in the realms of heaven, and my spirit is operating there, then there is this flow that goes through me and around me, and it carries with it heaven's government, because I am seated with Christ in the heavenly places, administrating government there. My life becomes a gateway for heaven's government to flow through that river. So they work together. The pathway of relationship and the pathway of responsibility work together. And ultimately, if God is not on the throne of my life, then I have no access to the heavenly throne to outwork that. If he's on the throne of my life, I've invited him, he invites me to take my place in the realms of heaven as a son, Lord, King, Son, whichever level of maturity I'm operating in, and then begin to see that flow through me and around me. Having the heavenly governmental position but no access for it to flow really doesn't actually accomplish much on the earth. There needs to be a flowing out from our lives into the spheres of government that we've been given, so that I can operate in those dual realms in a unified, harmonious way, which is why my spirit operates in the realm of heaven, my soul operates on the earth, one flows to the other, spirit flows through my soul out into the world. And to do that, I had to be separated, soul and spirit, from the control of the soul, reintegrated into oneness and relationship, intimacy, soul and spirit becoming one, and then I can operate in two dual realms. I could never operate in dual realms until my soul and spirit were separated and then reintegrated, and now I can operate in dual realms. So my spirit is very happy functioning in the realm of heaven, and then my soul functions and flows from that realm into this realm. When I choose to engage in the beginning of my day, and when I'm setting the frame for my day, then I'm engaging soul and spirit together. When I then begin to outwork that, then I'm flowing through from my spirit through my soul, but my spirit remains operating in the realms of heaven and operating governmentally in that realm. So that brings an order to my day that brings heaven's government through relationship to flow through me and outwork. And as I'm led by my spirit, then I will begin to bring government and rule into that, in that which I love. If I don't have that within my heart and have God's heart for it in love, then it becomes purely a ritual and a routine, which will never bring life, and that will become legalistic, and that will never work. So maintaining a relationship, absolutely vital in flowing and all these things.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay. Does anyone else want to share something? Ask anything?
I just want to say thanks very much for. There's just a few things that you shared recently that really helped about. Well, one was crucifying the weakness of the redemptive gift.
Right. Yeah.
One was saying that you can govern all the mountains from the main mountain, and what was the other one? There was another one that you said yes, just really helped a great deal moving forward. Oh, I think the other one was you said that the soul doesn't have to understand everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Which I must have assumed that it did have to understand it. So yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for helping me along.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that has just been my testimony, really, of how I've learned to overcome and grow through those things myself. And obviously, I want to give away what I've received and share that in a way which hopefully other people can benefit from, and don't have to go through necessarily all the battles of the soul once you recognize them. It took me quite a long time to overcome some of those things and to understand those things myself, particularly my own redemptive gift area. The need to know was a primary area, and therefore when I then dealt with that and I didn't need to know, then I was free to know so much more, and God was free to release that revelation. But it didn't have to come in a cognitive way. Now, sometimes it does when I'm connecting soul and spirit together and I'm talking to God. It's a very just me. But when I'm engaging my spirit, particularly in sort of eternity and in things which the soul just can't connect to because of its temporal time frame, then my spirit has learned to receive and lead, rule, direct, and my soul just happily comes into agreement with that majority of the time now. Which means so much more of an integration and a flow of life, and the fact that I can operate in dual realms and be connected and flowing without having to try and stop and figure it out, work it out, come into an agreement, because I'm already in agreement. My soul and spirit had to come into agreement, and that's where the wrestling often took place. Now my soul is in agreement, then there is just a normal flow that spirit and soul just cooperate, work together in a sort of seamless, integrated way. Although for the majority of the time they're operating in completely different realms. Sometimes my soul and spirit come together in one realm or the other, but majority of the times they're separated in different realms, but they're integrated, flowing, connected. So everything flows out of heaven without me having to try and stop, agree it, then I'm okay. So the agreement is already in place, which makes everything so much more of a just a lifestyle, rather than a series of trying to understand, agree, and then work things out and outwork things. I spent too much time trying to work things out and not enough time outworking things. And two words, exactly the same, but depending on which order they're in, determined which one was in charge. So I needed to work things out. Now I can outwork things, which just works so much better. Yeah, so that's good. And all of these things are just little nuggets of gold that in my own life I've found so valuable. And if people can receive them, then that's just the greatest blessing for me, just to give things away like that, because I know how helpful those things have been in my own life. So yeah, thank you. Okay, Anything else? Anyone else wants to ask or share?
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for the availability of the Sunday messages. When I heard the one of yesterday and about China, it really made me cry what's going on there. And this is just a comment because I feel so blessed that I can be a part of it. On the other hand, as you know, 6 weeks ago I fell quite unluckily on my left knee and it was broken, and I had to go through quite some not so nice procedure in hospital and delays with physical therapy and inflammation, and it's still quite of a battle because it's very swollen, and I always need a driver when I have to go to work and things like that. So I've been praying a lot into it, but it's kind of, yeah, not really as it should be. And I've been also to the courts, whatever came to my mind. On the other hand, there have been also quite some challenges around the house. And on one hand, I experience amazing blessing because I have many guests coming and staying here, but then I had in the midst of it some electricity breakdowns. There was also grace, like because some knew how to handle it, but then it happened again, and I called a specialist, and it was solved. Yesterday it happened again, so it's kind of either it's part of the fire that, yeah. So I just wanted to ask you, have you had at times where like one thing after the other happened, and God was training you with all these kind of not so good issues to govern in that, or did I miss something? I've also been in the courts because of this many times, and yeah, it's kind of an intense time these last 6 weeks.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. I think in looking at situations like that, it's discerning what is God using in our lives, and God will turn every situation and bring good out of it. That's always his desire, to bring something good out of it because he loves us. That doesn't necessarily mean that he arranged all those situations.
No, I don't think so.
He can
Yeah.
bring good out of it if we surrender into it and then embrace what he's bringing good out of it and discern that. If it's the enemy's plan to harm, rob, kill, and destroy, which it's his role, he's a liar and a thief, and he robs, kills, and destroys, then it's ensuring that we don't come into any agreement and cooperation with that, which is the first aspect of the discernment, so that we can be in cooperation with God in the process. Now, in a sense, we're called to be fruitful, to multiply, fill, subdue, and rule. So there are things that we do need to learn to subdue, to overcome, to grow. And there are things that Jesus says, Paul talks about a lot, about the trials. We must enter the kingdom through many tribulations, or count it all joy, brothers, when you encounter various trials. Or the testing of our faith produces endurance, and those sorts of things. And embracing that process and learning to grow and to mature, to overcome, is a key. Now, the enemy will always try and get into that process, and in that process he will try and discourage us, to make us focus on the negatives that are going on, and try and effectively rob our peace, our joy, and our love. And sometimes, when people struggle with a lot of these things, there can be an emotional, well, where's God, and doesn't he love me, and there's just that emotional sense of what's going on, and that's where the enemy will try and pull us down, drag us down, to feel the sort of oppressed and heavy, and those type of emotions, and it's recognizing that would be the enemy's plan and standing firm against it. If he is the author of some of those things, then yes, if there are legal rights, then go to the courts and deal with the legal rights. Some people have multiple accidents and things because there's an openness for the enemy to do that, and we can close that door and deal with the fact that that those legal rights can be removed, and then we can to live in health and blessing and provision and everything else. But it is a process, and what I've learned to do in my own life is to engage with the Spirit of the Lord, one of the 7 spirits of God, to help in the discerning of what is God doing in these situations. And I think that's the key. What is God doing in these situations, and cooperating with him. And that means not trying to remove all the obstacles all the time, because I grow through overcoming the obstacles. Jesus said we can speak to the mountains and tell them to move. He didn't say he was going to do it for us. We are more than overcomers. It talks about the fact that we're more than conquerors, but it's all through his love that we outwork it. So yeah, I have gone through many situations in my own life where I've had to learn to overcome. When I frame my day, I don't frame it to remove obstacles. I frame it to have the authorization to move those obstacles, and to overcome them, and to subdue them, and to rule through that. Yeah. So yeah, it's unfortunately Regina's gone off. Hopefully she can listen to this later. But it's always a difficulty for people when they face difficulties or things in the way, to know, am I supposed to work through this, overcome it, subdue and rule and be strengthened to enter the kingdom through dealing with those tribulations, or is this a ploy, a strategy of the enemy to bring me harm? And when we succumb to a particular strategy of the enemy, then as we engage God in that, he can still always bring good out of it. And sometimes in a situation where there's an accident, that sometimes forces us to rest. And the good that comes out of an accident like that is, hey, I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity I've got now of resting and engaging in more intimacy, and engaging in a deeper relationship with God. I'm going to use this rather than being upset and annoyed or angry that this has happened, and it's gonna stop me doing this and stop me doing that. I don't tend to think of the negatives when I deal with things like this. I want to see the positives, so I never think of, well, it will stop me doing. I always think of, well, what will it allow me to do? And in that, then you can always embrace the optimistic side of things, which is how God is going to bring good out of a situation. And accidents do happen. They're not always just spiritual things. I can trip. Now, in my life, then I want to ensure that I don't have a succession of accidents, so I become more careful. I learn. So, a couple of times, I tripped on our stairs because I was rushing to do something, and I actually damaged my toe, on the second toe on either foot, and it actually was exactly the same thing I did. I damaged it. It went totally black. It swelled up, and I looked at that situation and I thought, okay, yes, I can speak healing into my toe, and and very quickly it got restored, and the pain, I didn't have any pain, even though it was black. I had no pain because I spoke into it and removed the pain from the situation. So, I took authority over it when that happened. But then I looked at what can I learn from this. I tripped twice doing the same thing, so I didn't learn for the first time. Now, that then caused me to begin to formulate in my mind a strategy for not doing it again. So every time now I move to my stairs where I tripped, I actually inside now have a protection to stop me tripping again. So I'm now careful. And even when I need to get downstairs quickly, that triggers, because I do not want to have the same thing happen again and again. So I've learned from my having an accident. Once is an accident, twice is probably carelessness, because I didn't learn from the first occasion. So I've sort of try and look at scenarios like that to help me, to put things into place to guard and protect. Because it's all very well thinking, well, I'm blessed of God, I'm protected, I have the armor of God on me. If I then do stupid things and foolish things, then it's not God's issue that he has let me down and he's not protected me. I've just not been sensible. So there is a sense where, yes, I believe I have the blessing of God around me, his protection, his provision. I'm baptized into the Father, Son, and Spirit. I have the armor of God, the armor of light, the armor of righteousness, all those things. But I still have to be careful to be sensible in how I live. If I walked up the middle of a motorway, I couldn't be standing there saying, oh, well, God has protected me, I'm going to be okay. Because I would actually be doing something that tested that for the wrong reason. So I look at, in dealing with practical things, I'm always looking for what lessons can I learn. So yes, something good can come out of this, because then it will protect me the next time. And I've had that a number of times, and sometimes it's like I've had to work through the healing aspect of it when I damage something, and I expect healing to manifest in my life much quicker because I'm in faith for it. This weekend we had some really nice weather, and I was able to get out in the garden for the first time in a while. So I tackled some jobs that I'd been waiting to do over, from the winter. So I was going to chop down some trees, chop down some branches that were blocking the sun in the garden, and I needed to clear a whole load of brambles and thorns and thistles and stuff out of the way to get to these trees. So I had gloves and everything on, but even in spite of all that, I have basically scratches, cuts, blisters all over my hands, thorns and areas, and so there's a sense where I have damaged those things by doing what I was doing, because I'm pretty gung-ho when I get going with something like that. I don't think too much about the pain at the time. I just press through it and do it, and I had gloves on, but afterwards my hands were pretty much scratched and raw, but I speak into my hands to bring restoration to them. So although that's happened, I'm not going to allow that to work out over the next 2 weeks. For me, I would expect the cells of my hand to be restored much quicker, because I'm speaking life into it, I'm ruling into it, and I'm establishing that I have spiritual authority in my body to bring a restoration. Now, I'm not sure whether I could work on giving myself supernatural protection in those things. I'm not sure. but I know subsequently, I know that I heal, and the pain of things I control. You know, I don't let pain ever stop me and affect me, because I remove the pain from a lot of things. So, but then I've learned how to do that over a long period of time, in terms to live in health and wholeness, and to begin to administer health into my body, and to be able to speak to the cells, and you know, in terms of communion, and seeing that bring, you know, health to me, so that my body, you know, has a supernatural healing process. Because there is a miracle where everything is completely gone, and there is a healing process where everything is brought into health. And I think speeding up that healing process is something we can begin to learn how to do, once we know that we have authority to speak into our body. Now, if I've been abusing my body, then I can't just see all that abuse just change without dealing with the consequences of it. So, you know, if, for instance, in my physical body, I had, let's say I've been overeating and I put on stones and stones of weight. Now, I could have supernatural weight loss, but I have to deal with how I've abused my body. So I need to repent and renounce that, and not, you know, and start eating more healthily. You know, that's the common sense element that I have to put in place. Because what I think would be an abuse of God's grace and mercy is, okay, I can ask for supernatural weight loss and I lose a stone of weight instantly, and then I go back to eating the same way as I did before. So I go back to him and ask for some more supernatural weight loss. I think that is, well, taking the mickey, and I think there's a sense where I'm responsible to bring government into my life, and therefore I have to say, why was I overeating? What was I using the food for? What was I compensating with that food for? Why was I needing to eat lots of chocolate or whatever it might have been? Was I feeling sad? Was there a deficiency? I ask those sort of questions because I want to understand what goes on around my life, so that then I can begin to govern and rule that in my life. Not just be subject to the circumstances, but to make sure that I'm aligning my spirit and body, my soul and body, with my spiritual health, so that my soul and body come into alignment with what my spirit has. And that sometimes means me taking stock and doing an inventory of my thinking, my emotions, my physical health, and actually making sure that I'm not out of sync in any of those areas, which often I do, you know. And sometimes it will be, okay, no, I need to start to bring some rule into this. So then I will fast certain things. If I feel certain things have got a hold over me, then I'll take a decision, well, I'm not eating those for a month or 2 months, just because I don't want something ruling over me. So like chocolate or sweets and all those sorts of things, you know, they're all very nice and they taste nice and they're great, but they're not over healthy. And so sometimes I'll just deliberately choose not to eat anything like that for a period to make sure that it's got no hold. And, you know, and I did that recently. And, you know, sometimes you detox from sugar. Particularly, you know, over Christmas and periods like that where there's more eating and there's more stuffed food around and all that stuff. You know, it can become very habitual quite quickly. So you have to sort of begin government into things and begin to bring the rule of God into those scenarios. So for me, then I would stop eating those type of things and I would eat more fruit, you know, and begin to eat more healthily to bring order and balance back. You know? So, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I think with food, I'm quite good with that. And God has helped me there to have a good lifestyle. But maybe I worked too hard in that season. Yeah, because as it is, when you are alone here with everything, it's sometimes really a lot. Yeah.
Oh, sure, I understand.
Yeah.
I think it's making sure that you're spiritually at a place of rest,
Yeah.
and then your body and your soul can come into that place of rest.
Yeah.
Because I'm extremely occupied with a lot of things. I do a lot of things
Yeah.
in my life. You know,
It's getting more and more.
but I don't feel busy, or I
Yeah.
don't feel that these things are too much, because
Mhm.
I'm always coming from a place of peace and rest, and
Yeah.
I frame and order things supernaturally to enable me to do things much quicker.
Yeah.
So, I fit in more into my day than I'm actually is physically possible in the time
Yeah.
frames that I have, because I begin to order time to expand it and contract it. So time is subject to me. I'm not subject to time.
Yeah.
And that's something which I've learned to do, and I have an expectation of framing my day at the beginning of my day, that I will have the capacity, the resource, the energy, everything to be able to do everything that God calls me to do in that day, what I'm authorized and mandated to do.
Mhm.
If I am then subject to what other people want me to do, or the circumstances want me to do, and that contradicts what God calls me to do, then I make a choice to prioritize what God has called me to do above all those other things. And I'm looking to seek first God's kingdom
Mhm.
in righteousness, so that He will be able to release everything I need. And at times that means me taking the governmental perspective of it, and sometimes you have to say no.
Mhm.
When people are putting pressures and demands on you, you have to say no at times, when it doesn't align with what God is giving you to do. And in family life and in different situations, there can be pressure to do things. We only need to do what we're seeing the Father doing. That will be seeking first the kingdom, and everything else will be outworked from that perspective, which is really important to learn how to do. I've had to learn to say no to things, because people want me to do things all the time, but I say no a lot, because I know it's not what God calls me to do, and I know I'm not authorized to do it. And if I did do it, I would be doing it in my own strength anyway, which is why people get burnt out and tired a lot, because they do things in their own strength. In God's strength, I can run and not be weary, and walk and not be tired. I can soar on the wings of eagles. I have a scriptural precedent for that. If I'm waiting on the Lord, those who wait on the Lord, those who serve the Lord, those who are in intimacy and relationship with the Lord, can run and not be weary, and walk and not be tired. It's like those who aren't will get weary and get tired, and won't be able to soar and engage in the spiritual dimension to it, because they'll be subject to doing things out of duty, out of fear, out of obligation, out of manipulation, fear of man. It's really important that we are not subject to fear, and are motivated by fear in what we do, or obligation or duty. If I'm doing something out of love, then I'm empowered. If I'm doing something out of obligation and duty, then I'm not. And if I have obligation or duty that isn't motivated by love, then I need to deal with my heart, and I need to receive, and I'm talking about in relationships, because in relationships, let's say I've got relationships with my family, or with my wife, with my children, or whatever, and other relationships. If they are a duty and an obligation, then I'm not going to be motivated in love to outwork them. And there's a huge difference between doing something because I'm obliged, because, well, they're my family, I should do something, um, uh, and doing something because I have the love of God motivating me to want to bring blessing to people. And you have to get that direction from God, not from others, and not from even sometimes our own motivations. Because Jesus, when faced with some of those questions, said, well, who are my mother, brothers, sister, whatever? Who are they? And there's a question, anyone really who God is calling me to engaging relationship with, rather than make an assumption that it's got to be the priority is this or the priority is that. And if we're led by the Spirit and we only do what we see the Father doing, then we can't go much wrong. And the love of God that I carry motivates me to do the right things. And sometimes the love of God will motivate me to say no, not always yes. But it's a lifestyle of being led by the Spirit and not being led by the flesh, which is key in that.
Mark,
Yeah.
for a while now, I've sensed angels descending and ascending. I can feel the sensation.
So yeah. Is there a question with that? You're sensing angels? Okay. I can't hear you, Agnes. Are you saying anything more? Okay. You got anything more, Agnes? Not hearing it. Okay.
Hello, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Agnes was just asking, what's the bigger picture when you feel sensation of angels on your face?
Okay. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're engaging in the angelic realm and you sense you have the angels that are assigned to you around you, that's sort of a normal developing that intimacy with them and sensing their presence and being able to engage with them. But on a bigger picture, if there are particular angels which are not just the normal angels that are engaging with you, then you really want to find out what they are and what they're doing. I think that's the key. If they're coming, why are they coming? As God sent them? If He sent them, what purpose? What is their mandate? What are they authorized to do? And then come into agreement with them. If you're sensing them on your physical body or around you, then sometimes that can just be a sense of the presence of God, bringing a sense of joy or peace or refreshment to you, because God assigns angels as ministering spirits. So sometimes it can just be they want to minister to you. So yield to that and receive that ministry, that serving you, and that can be emotional, it can be physical, spiritual, in all ways. If you sense that, okay, there is an ascending and descending, like Jesus described, Jacob's ladder, the doorway open, angels ascending and descending, again, what is that for? And again, I'd go back to God and begin to ask Him if there are particular angelic assignments. If you're not getting anything from the angels, then I'd go back to God and seek Him and say, okay, is there a purpose here I'm missing? Is there something that you want me to engage in deeper? Then go for it. Definitely, there's a larger increase in angelic encounter that we are all facing. As angels are very active in times of transition and change, and I believe we're in a time such as that. That you know, and God has assigned orders of angels to help us transition. You know, I mean, I did. Regina mentioned it earlier. I showed a video of a China underground church, and you know, how they would meet for 12 hours straight and engage, and people here struggle to sit down for 45 minutes. And it's like, okay, why? Because there's a hunger and a passion. Why? Because they're probably in a situation where they need God, and they're out of their comfort zone of complacency. And I think the Western church can be very easily complacent, and God wants us to prepare for what's coming, and complacency won't work. It's like things might be reasonably comfortable now, but they're not always going to stay so. And if we want to not be subject to what's going on in the world, then we need to establish God's government so that we set the agenda for that and administrate it and bring rule and government into it, which means being prepared for what's coming. And I'm not saying that it will necessarily be persecution like the Chinese church, but it isn't going to stay the same. Things are not going to stay the same as they are, and some of that may well be God's doing. The shaking of all things is about revealing whether our life is built on a strong foundation of solid rock, of the kingdom. Because Jesus described, building the foundations on the rock. The wise man built his house on the rock. And of course, Jesus was described as the rock which was cut out of the mountain without hands, which then grew to fill the earth. And so that which is of the kingdom will remain, and that which is of things that have been created ourselves will not remain. So we can prepare for that shaking by engaging God and seeking Him for the preparation of what is to come. And I've sort of showed the Chinese church video really because I wanted to encourage people to look at, hey, these guys are not complaining in a 120-degree room and being preached to and teach for 12 hours at a time, and they asked to come back the next day and the next day and do the same thing. They obviously have a hunger and a passion, and often they don't have the written word of God, so they're looking to engage in a different way. Whereas we have no problem. We have the word of God and we have the Bibles and everything else, but are we embracing with the same hunger and passion and zeal and enthusiasm that they have? So yeah, it was a challenge to prepare really, and not be complacent. Okay, all right, anything else?
Mike, have you heard about the revival going on in San Diego?
Yeah, I've heard some of the things. I think it's a few people I've heard of who've been involved in other moves like that before. In fact, I'm going to San Diego in 1st of April, 31st of March, so going to be there for a few days. Also, while I'm in the States, there's this call thing, which is on the 110th anniversary of Azusa Street. So I think, yeah, I'm going there in a strategic time.
Yeah.
I'm just not convinced that the traditional revival type things is really going to establish the government of God on the earth. Not saying that I don't want to see people saved, and I'm sure what's going on is great, but will it inspire people to engage in more and to embrace their responsibility as a son of God, or will it just peter out because people are looking for experiences? And I ask those questions because we've been through that ourselves. Having revival, having meetings every night, the power of God moving, miracles, signs and wonders, all those sorts of things. But it's being careful to see, why is God doing this? What's behind it? Why has he visited us in such a way? What is he calling us to engage, and not just get caught up in the externals of the things that are going on, but to see, what is this about? And I know God wants to establish the government of God in the southwest of the US, as he's done in other areas. So for me, it's a sign that God is doing something. But I like to put those signs into a bigger context. If that's a call for people to come into a supernatural dimension of God, then it isn't about earthly experiences. It's about opening up heaven and embracing heaven beyond those experiences. But it's great that God is doing something.
Yeah.
Let's just make sure we follow through with what it is he's doing. Because most revivals stop. Most moves of God stop. Now, sometimes they are seasonal, and God intends them to be seasonal, but sometimes they shouldn't stop, and we stop them because we make them the focus rather than God being the focus.
Yeah. So would you say one of the keys would be, I think I've heard someone talk about this before, I can't remember the source, but I think someone was talking about, I think it was Kathy Walters who said that all revival ends in control of man, and that somebody else, it might have been you or Ian, saying that the key would be to open up the everlasting doors from the government of heaven to ensure that a revival wouldn't peter out.
Yeah. And, in a sense, revival, there are lots of words that are used to describe moves of God. You have revival, renewal, restoration, reformation. They're all begins with R, and it's discerning what is it about. What is God trying to do? Is he trying to get our attention, to get us to focus on listening to him so that he can then bring us into something new? When I first engaged heaven, the very first time I had a sort of real heavenly encounter, God showed me what happens when these moves of God take place. And he showed me a portal, he showed me glory pouring out onto the earth, and he showed me like a conduit through the atmosphere. And then he showed me what shuts it off. And he showed me that in the atmosphere, because of what was going on the earth, usually through relational issues or it becoming an excessive thing focused on the manifestations rather than God, but generally usually through people falling out, usually over issues of control and who's in charge and who's getting the glory out of it, then the enemy often blocks those things off and stops them.
Yeah.
And that's why they stop. And often, they go into, often what I've seen, and history sort of bears it out, they go into something which either almost sort of memorializes it, and I remember hearing of a move of God in the US when the power of God came and split a Perspex lectern in two, and it sparked God coming in dramatic power. Now that lectern is actually enshrined in a case.
Right.
But God is no longer moving in the same way. Because rather than, God, what are you showing us, and how do we embrace that, and let's move through that, it focuses on the manifestations. It focuses on the externals rather than the internals. So, yeah, I think sometimes God, as a result of people engaging him and calling out on him and crying out for mercy, and he does something, but then it's like looking to administrate what he's doing from a heavenly perspective is key. You know, and a lot of revivals, I mean, I look at the Welsh revival, you know, amazing thing, and yet it did not accomplish everything it was going to accomplish because of their failure to administrate it from heaven. You know, so there's a lot we can learn from previous experiences. You know, I don't know the specifics of what's going on in San Diego, but I'm aware that, you know, there are, you know, signs and wonders and things happening and miracles happening and things. In everything, it will be, what are you saying, God? You know. You know, yeah.
So following on from that, if there was you may be aware of a bench of 3 in San Diego, could they ask God for a mandate to oversee that, to ensure that it didn't, you know, end in control or whatever, or is that something, I don't know?
I get, those that are who have anything to do with that area as part of their mandate, as part of their spheres of government or influence, could certainly be looking to administrate it, but that may not actually be what people on the earth might want, and that's where you have to bring an alignment between heaven and earth, because that's really all about God's manifest purpose in it. What is He purposes to do in this?
Right.
And the byproduct of that may be the miracles and the things. But what is God? And I know God's purpose is to establish a heavenly government and to establish places for the harvest and everything like that. And so that would be how I would, if I was involved in it, I would be looking at, okay, what is the purpose of this and how can we administrate the purpose of this? You know, when people are caught up in all the excitement and the sort of all the things that are going on, sometimes people can miss the bigger purpose because they can't see the wood for the trees, if you like. It's just like, wow, 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 wow. And actually that's the very time to engage God in the heavens and find out, rather than get so caught up in all the activity of it. Hey, there is a heavenly opening here, glory is being poured out. Let's engage to see what the purpose of that glory is. Then we can administrate that purpose. And once that purpose is begun to be administrated, actually the outpouring may stop. Because sometimes outpourings are to get response, they're to get our attention. And, you know, rather than, well, this is going to be what it's like now forever, because that can be a false sense of what it's like. You know, because I don't believe cities of refuge are going to be places of revival, like just going to have meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. They're going to be a place of government where we establish God's heavenly government and we live that out as a lifestyle. We won't be dependent on manifestations of meetings in that environment. So it won't look like what we've seen before. It will just be how we live in health and wholeness and provision, and because we're administrating and governing and ruling it. You know, so what people generally call moves of God and revivals, for me, is not what God is intending to come. They're usually a form of getting our attention. But they're always good fun. I mean, you know, it's great to be in an environment where something like that's happening. I think it's just making sure that we don't then have, that's what normality should be like. And I think that's where I think people have gone astray. Oh, this is what normal life should be, a series of meetings where the power of God is present. Well, I don't think that's really what God is looking for. He wants us to live in the fullness of our relationship with Him and the kingdom, so that we manifest the kingdom around us and we bring the rule of God around us, you know, and that's great. But I don't think it's always as simple as, you know, ongoing meetings with manifestations. But,
Thanks.
Okay. And when I go to San Diego, I'm certainly not looking to go and recreate some sort of emotional or that type of experience. I just want to go and relate to people and find out what God's doing and help support them and encourage them in what God is doing in that area, which isn't to do with, for me, okay, we're going to have a whole now meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. That's not what I call the reformation that God wants. He wants a reformation to bring us back to a restored condition, which is to be sons of God, bringing government and ruling. Because I think there's a huge difference between the works of the kingdom and the kingdom. So Jesus manifested the results of his kingdom governmental authority, which was healing and deliverance and raising the dead and all those things. Those were the works that were associated with the authority that he carried. They weren't the kingdom. They were just the manifestations of the kingdom's presence. So what we need to do is learn to bring the kingdom and to see the manifestation of God's kingdom outworked, which isn't about meetings. And I think this is what we've got to get away from. It's not about church meetings or revival meetings. It's about a lifestyle of living in the authority of the kingdom. And if that should be that someone walks into my sphere where I'm filling my sphere with love and joy and peace and healing and health and wholeness, and they should get healed, just like Peter's shadow healed somebody, that is a manifestation of the kingdom which is operating around my life. That isn't me calling a meeting and then, hey, I'm going to release these works in this setting. I think God wants it to outwork in our lives rather than the false environment that meetings create. Now, if they inspire us to live it out, great. But often they become the focus, and then maintaining the meetings and maintaining the move becomes the focus rather than what God's original purpose was to outwork, in it. So we'll see. If it's still going on when I'm over there, I'll also obviously look to engage the atmosphere and see what God's purpose is in it. And that will be what I'll be asking. What's God's purpose in what's been going on? So, anyway, awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, okay.